I like anything with massive explosions. I'm like, yes.
I would never have guessed that. That's amazing.
Hey, are you a manager? Do you have to give feedback? It's pretty challenging, right? Well, I was lucky enough to meet the guru of feedback. Well, someone I find to be particularly aspirational, Penny Blackmore. So today we have a little interview with Penny. Well, it's actually quite long. We actually end up going quite broad at the beginning, so stick with us. But then we take a deep dive into feedback and, some tips and tricks that Penny has to offer to give the most constructive and useful feedback to your colleagues and to help everyone move forward as a team. So check it out, tell me what you think, and have a great day.
So, hello, Penny. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay in the sort of new world order of confinement. It's okay.
It's like a really chaotic time, but it's also really boring because it's like you're just in your house all the time.
Well, and I find that look, I work a lot with Canada, so I'm getting a lot more work in the afternoons. So I thought I could structure my day in a comfortable way. I can have the mornings and the afternoons to work, but it's actually tended to be a big jumble, as you can see behind me. It's actually really busy, which is weird. I can't even sit on the balcony and muse about things.
Oh, damn. It's my favorite thing to do. Stroking my beard.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for making the time. So you're originally from Australia. You live in Berlin. And if I my notes are correct, you studied in Sydney, and you studied sociology and anthropology.
Well, I did those subjects for like one semester and then I dropped out of uni.
You don't have to tell me that because it sounds amazing, and I'm super jealous. Because I figured if ever I was to go to university, I'll do like adult study. Anthropology would be really interesting. I've always been like super curious about what that's like. But actually, I was going to skip through the studies, but what really interested me the most was you were a volunteer for Meals on Wheels. Is that right?
Yeah, for like 2 months.
But how was that? Were you driving and delivering or just driving?
Yeah, this is back in Sydney. So I was driving. You just take meals to old people's houses and you sit and chat with them for a while. But the problem is that like old people talk for a really long time. So sometimes by the time I got to my last person, it was really late at night and they'd be like, hello, dear. And it was like, it was hard. But I love old people. We abandon them. It's depressing. Yeah, I'm a big fan of old people.
Right. And then since Meals on Wheels and studying, you've been pretty much in biz dev and sales.
Yes. So I sort of started my career in marketing, and then I started getting jobs in the startup space and in the digital product studios. And I was doing new business and business development stuff there. So that just means like client acquisition, working on some sort of like very scrappy marketing campaigns in terms of like maybe events or workshops or email lists and that sort of thing. And then I just kind of got into some sales strategy, which is what I'm doing now. And I basically work with startups and digital agencies at the moment.
Nice. And speaking of workshops and boot camps, that's how we met on a sales call.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Yes, that's right. I always forget actually that I think I sold you a ticket to one of the public boot camps at AJ and Smart.
That's exactly right. But I had to say that whole experience was incredibly transformative for me, and it all started with our sales call because I really felt like I was pulled in a very human way. Like now I think you're always like I'm very adverse to getting pulled into a funnel or finding myself on an upsell, and I'm just like I find it so irritating. And I was like so ready to give you my credit card and everything. I was just like, let's go.
Yeah.
You made it so easy to purchase.
Oh, thank you. I believed in value and relationship-based selling. So less about digital sales funnels, and it's less about data-driven pressure that's being put on a buyer. And it's much more about just opening up conversations and keeping the human touch, which I realize is like, it's not super scalable. And that's why I tend to work with very early stage businesses.
That makes sense.
Just so that they're developing a really solid network. And then they can kind of maybe move into some more mass marketing stuff. But yeah, I'm a people person. So
Well, clearly your Meals on Wheels and the human sales touch. So do you, would you give any advice to anyone trying to make their funnel more human?
I think, okay, so I mean, the biggest mistake I see people making when they're selling is just to talk about themselves the whole time or their product. It's super important to open with a whole bunch of questions and do more listening than you are doing talking. So I would say, like, once you get to a point where you're actually talking to your customers, it's a good idea to let them tell you how to win their business instead of you trying to force them to buy something from you.
You just like base it on the person in front of you.
Basically, it's the first thing you need to find out is like, what's the problem, and then go past what they tell you what they think the problem is, because a lot of companies will say to you like, oh, well, we don't really have any problems. Like, everything's great. We've got a lot of inbound business, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so don't ever believe that. That people are afraid to, you need to build a bit of trust before people will actually reveal their challenges to you. So
Right.
you need to do that by sort of exposing some vulnerability or explaining to them that there are sort of similar problems in different businesses like theirs, so that they feel like they're not alone. They're not this sort of, they've made a mistake or something.
Yeah.
So sorry, go on.
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, that's
so I find that in our industry in animation, people are kind of adverse to sales conversations, but at the same time, I you know, anyone that wants to pitch a concept idea or a series idea, they're in a sales conversation almost immediately. So I feel like these tools could be so useful for creative people as well to understand that they're entering into a sales conversation very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, like, I do think there's a difference between pitching and selling. Selling is kind of the last step. So once you've put all the pieces in place, then right at the end, that's when you get into the selling stuff, where you're negotiating, you're talking about contracts and pricing, and you're actually going for the close. But pitching is a very sort of, it's a whole world of its own. I remember when I used to work in advertising, that's sort of like where the pitch originated, I guess. And we used to get pitch doctors in who would come and look at our pitches and rearrange them and think about that stuff. So I really enjoy pitching. I really enjoy doing like pitch decks and telling a story and creating a compelling narrative. And so I actually do that for some of my startup clients when they're looking for funding or they're looking for new investment, basically. So I help them to put together their pitch deck, which is always really fun. And trying to figure out what the hook is for the audience. Sometimes, you know, basically what you need to do is make sure you're doing your research so that the people that you're talking to feel like this is a tailored presentation for them. So I think, yeah, in the startup space, there are some technical investors and there are some non-technical investors, and you have to kind of find out who you're talking to and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's so important for folks pitching shows as well to understand the platform they're talking to. I think that if you turn up and start pitching an adult show to a platform that only does preschool, for example, then it's an uncomfortable meeting.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I also noticed that you, actually one of your endorsements on LinkedIn was about doctoring people, helping with people write their CVs.
Yes. Yeah. So my first job in the tech space was at a startup called General Assembly. So they do immersive education courses for like the new millennium is what they used to say. And so they taught students how to do like UX design or web development and stuff like that. And it was my job to make sure that the students got jobs after they graduated from the course. Awesome. So half of that role was like business development stuff. So I would kind of go out and meet all of the companies in Sydney and all the hiring managers in Sydney that might hire our grads, so that I could kind of like create those relationships. But then the other half was careers coaching. So I helped the students with their resumes and their cover letters and their interview technique and networking stuff and LinkedIn and all of that stuff. And so when I moved to Berlin, and I was quite determined not to get a job.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, I'm never working again. I just decided to write resumes for people. And so I did that for 6 months or so. And then I just got completely exhausted by it. It's a really hard job.
Yeah, I was gonna, that feels like a whole other conversation. That must be so difficult.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially when people haven't. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not blaming them, but there are a lot of people who haven't really put any kind of strategic oversight to their career, so that their resume, there's no way to make it look good if it's
Right.
if the experience on the page is very disparate and it doesn't make sense, and it's kind of all over the place. So those were some hard clients, and then the other hard clients were the people who came in with really amazing resumes. And I was like, okay, I have to make this even better. So it was really interesting, because I think I learnt that no one really knows what they're doing. Not the amazing candidates and not the terrible candidates.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, people just don't understand the system. They don't understand the rules. They don't understand how to write a resume. So yeah, it was an interesting project for me.
And in your experience, do you think that there's like a universal rule, regardless of the sort of market you're in or your industry you're in? Is there like a universal rule, or do you think there's like specific to industry rules?
There are definitely specific to industry rules. For example, like if you're in academia, then you're going to have a different resume format than if you're in professional industries. But I would say across the board, just like the biggest mistake that I see people making is that they try and get the job with their resume. They're like, I'm going to put so much detail here. I'm going to list, like, each piece of experience I have is going to go on for 2 pages. The statistics say that hiring managers look at resumes for 7 seconds. And I can attest to this because I'm a hiring manager. So it's like, you're just quickly looking for what you need. And then if you don't see it, you pass it aside.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of like making the relevant information really stand out on the page, so that it's unmissable, basically.
Yeah. So there seems to be, like, with everything you've said, there seems to be a strong storytelling component in everything you do, whether it's working on people's CVs or, the sales side of things. And also you write.
I do, yeah. So I do creative writing, but I've never published anything. But I've done, I used to write these sort of ranty opinion pieces for The Guardian. Yeah, and I'd really enjoy writing. It's really hard, and I haven't written anything good for a while. But
Well, I read something that I thought was really good in The Guardian, written by you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's so relevant now. It's like, I think it's really, really great. And it's the piece about like Uber and the fact that we can, how did you put it? I actually wrote it down somewhere here. You can outsource pretty much every aspect of irritation in your life, but you can't outsource loneliness. Like, that's such a great quote.
This is so apt for right now, because we're not getting those little human interactions. So
Right?
it's super important for us to be doing any kind of internet call that we can do.
And this idea of like trying to take out all the inconvenience of life, and sort of make it easy, as it were. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, there's no other way to put it, but we all have these kind of first world problems, I guess. And I'm no better. Like, I've just ordered a bunch of pot plants off Amazon while I can. But I think this idea that we should never be inconvenienced is a real mistake. And we're going to get to a point where every aspect of our life is data-driven and digitized and outsourced and optimized. And it's just, we're going to be left with ourselves, and we're going to wonder what's there.
Well, exactly. And I think that that's where this time of isolation for people is going to be very challenging, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
My previous job, I left and I had a real moment of kind of solitude and like, what the hell am I doing? And that sort of introspective time. I actually went to Portugal and sort of walked around with a backpack for like 3 weeks trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. But it took sort of 3 years to get to a place where I, felt comfortable sitting with myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. So being alone is just being alone and you have no feelings about it. But being lonely is perceived social isolation. So they're two different things. I think it's really healthy to be able to be alone without, and also like, we're very repellent to negative feelings, and it is actually okay to feel lonely sometimes. That's totally fine.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I was thinking about that this weekend because you get into routines. You get into your routine of like, this is what I do on a Friday, this is what I do on a Saturday, this like Sunday's the day I do this. Well, there's this whole thing in France of people not staying home. They're being asked to stay home, they're not staying home. And so
Right.
On Sunday, I was like, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to go to the local market and I'm going to pick up some cheese and some this and some of that because I'm in France, right? And then I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. What am I doing? Like, this is absurd. I don't need to leave. I have probably 6 months of tin goods and stuff hidden in this apartment, right?
Yeah.
And so I started digging into it. But I think that idea of routine, I think, fits into this whole thing of being inconvenienced. And so how has your routine changed, or how are you changing it at the moment?
This is really funny because I worked from home anyway. And so
Right.
in some ways, and I know this is, it's not sensitive, but I'm kind of enjoying this because all my friends are now very online, and people are available to talk during the day. And so it's kind of nice. I feel like I'm not at home by myself. I'm at home with the whole online community. So my routine hasn't changed at all. I get up in the morning, try and shower first thing, because otherwise I sometimes get to the end of the day and I'm like, Penny. I just do my work in my kitchen upstairs. I talk to people, I eat lunch. I'm not one of those people who has like a super optimized routine. I'm too lazy. So yeah, I just go about my business, and now I just get to kind of, it's weird because I kind of feel like I've been released from capitalism in some way. Like I have no FOMO because I know there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
It's cold outside, but the sky's blue. I just read books. There's no pressure to like do anything, which really taps into something like positive inside of me.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it's exactly how I feel. I actually, if I'm 100% honest with you, I feel more useful now than I did before.
Yeah, I feel more connected. I definitely don't feel more useful because my work is like, a lot of my clients have put our work on hold while this sort of blows over. But I do feel like, I feel more like myself in a weird way. I'm like,
it's not weird at all. I don't think that's weird at all.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be very temporary as well. Like this might just be the honeymoon period at the start of a very long, miserable couple of months. But I'm trying to enjoy it as it comes. And I've been eating a lot. Like I'm cooking something really fabulous for every meal of the day. So.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's certainly something I think is advisable, is to celebrate like yourself in a way, like, make every meal fabulous and try and do special things. I think that's a really good piece of advice too from me anyway. And I think that this idea of waves as well, the idea that it's like, it's at some moment you're feeling like it's okay and you're dealing with it well, and then other moments you get sort of too much news all at once or whatever it is, and you're like, oh my God. The other day I sat with the numbers that came over the France Inter, the radio here in Paris, and I just couldn't believe it. Like the numbers in Italy and what have you. I was just like, it's such a surreal thing to think about.
Very surreal, yeah. I've also been watching lots of disaster and apocalypse movies. Like I just feel like it's so on theme.
It's a terrible idea.
No, I love them. I mean, like this was my favorite genre of movie anyway. I die for any kind of like anything with massive explosions. I'm like, yes.
I would never have guessed that. It's like...
Yeah, Yeah, I've watched like a couple of Alien movies. I've watched, yeah, I'm just like, I love anything with like catastrophic consequences.
So what's your favorite then?
I just rewatched Contagion. I
Oh
love
gosh.
Interstellar is incredible,
Oh
although
yeah.
the ending is kind of awkward. I loved, what's the one with Amy Adams? And it goes like, and the aliens come to Earth, and it's called Arrival.
Oh, Rival. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Incredible movie. Yeah, I just watched Alien for the first time with Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, how was that?
Sigourney.
Yes, you're going to yeah.
Oh my God, she's so gorgeous. I was like, what?
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a great movie. They do all of it with models instead of CGI, which I think is better. I like the models better. Yeah, I've just been watching shitloads of movies. I don't know.
That sounds great. It just reminds me of why I actually wanted to talk to you.
Oh, we finally got to the point.
Yes, exactly. Obviously on your podcast with Brittany, the Happy Hour Career Talk, which is easy to find on Apple or Spotify.
It's on any podcasting platform. So
Yes.
Whatever you use, it's there. It's called Happy Hour Career Talk.
And it's awesome. But you talk a lot about, career advice. And one of the things that I've found incredibly valuable and a little bit frightening from you is your ability to give constructive feedback.
Thank you. I realized I'm really bad at receiving feedback. I really hate
Really?
it. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I'm kind of working on that at the moment. But people are often too scared to give me feedback, so that works to my advantage.
I have to say, when we first met, I was a bit intimidated by you because you're like smart, funny, to the point, and also incredibly articulate. So I was like,
I don't want to. It sounds weird, but like people often say this to me, and I'm like, that is crazy to me because like once you get to know me, I'm a real dork. I'm like a major dork, and I'm also like really gross. I'm really hopeless. I'm a total mess. So don't be intimidated.
Well, I don't know if I'd agree with that. I find you rather aspirational. But
Yeah.
let's talk about feedback, because I think that it's a hard thing. And I'm currently in the management team of a studio in Canada that has 260 odd employees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and especially in the development department, we're constantly sort of iterating and constantly, sort of dialing up, changing and evolving what we're doing. And so it's important to be able to give clear, constructive feedback without people taking it personally.
Yeah.
But the fact is we're working to find a solution to a problem. And so your first iteration is probably not going to be the one that we choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So have you got any tips on how to sort of give clear, direct, constructive feedback without being harmful?
Do I ever?
Yay!
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're communicating to the team that you're going to be trying a new feedback model from now on in, so that they know what to expect. It's like setting the expectation for, so the last thing you want them to do is kind of go around talking to each other and be like, did Heath do this with you the other day? What's with that? Like, you need to sort of be able to control the conversation. Right. So at your next team meeting or something, I think it might be worth saying something like, okay, guys, so what I really want to start working on within our team is making sure that instead of like letting little things pile up or not recognizing your efforts, I want to try and start giving you in real time feedback, feedback in real time, so that they just know that it's coming. And then you can also say, you're also welcome to give feedback to me. And this is a two-way conversation, so that they feel comfortable not knowing that it's not you just unloading onto them. It might be there's an ability for them to kind of come back and have a chat about it as well. So the second thing is, I always like to make sure that when you're thinking about feedback, you try and take the emotion out of it. So just neutralize the conversation in your own mind, because another person's performance is not personal. Or if their idea isn't good and you hate it, that's not personal either. It's about them. and it's about how you as a team can get to the ideal outcome together. So try and just take a deep breath and be like, okay, what is the objective fact here? What are the objective parts of the conversations that I'm going to focus on? And then kind of go with that. Does that all make sense?
That makes total sense. It's funny you say that, because I, in full transparency, a lot of what I do are based on our early conversations and feedback you've given me. So it's not a surprise that a lot of this, I was recently putting it into place in a design meeting where I felt like the sort of flow of feedback was completely abstract. And so people were getting sort of dropped off and left and forgotten, and they're not really knowing what the hell happened. They did their work, it wasn't selected, they don't know why, and the thing pops up 6 months later and someone else has finished it, and it's very frustrating. So I just kind of streamlined the whole thing and just tried to make it very transparent. We did it together as a group. The first couple of discussions, obviously, when I mentioned that you can give feedback to me, there was just silence. But in my experience, that's normal. It takes time to earn people's trust, and then gradually they sort of build into that. So, and that trust aspect, are there ways that you feel like, is there something you feel like you need to do deliberately, or does it happen naturally to earn people's trust?
Yeah, definitely start with a question.
Right.
So instead of going straight to the judgment on a creative concept or just kind of throwing your opinion out there, you could say something like, Brittany, can you tell me what your thought process behind this character was and how that fits into our overall story arc, so that she can explain. And then you might be like, actually, that's pretty cool. I like that. I see it from your point of view now. Or you might be like, okay, so for me, that reads like the ABC. So you can kind of like start, instead of being accusatory and kind of jumping in and attacking someone's work, you start with giving them the opportunity to defend their creative decisions.
Like if you're saying, don't worry, I want transparency and da-da-da-da, they're looking at you in this way of like, yeah, probably not. This is nonsense.
Yeah, right. That's interesting, because I think if people are aware that you're giving them feedback in the moment, and that feedback is allowing you to perform better or achieve more successful outcomes, then that's a trust building exercise in itself. There's no sort of fear that, like they're going to be working for an entire year and then they're going to have a performance review and there's going to be all these secrets that will be revealed from their manager. Like they have transparency across your process throughout the entirety of the year, because you've been good enough to actually share how you're feeling about their work. So I think feedback in itself, like the main reason that we do this is there's no reason to delay progress. Like if you're able to give people positive and negative feedback in the moment, then you can improve incrementally very quickly, and it builds a lot of trust with your team. For example, I'm in a lot of pitches and a lot of proposal presentations, and so often I'll do those with other colleagues, and we'll walk out of the room and I'll say, hey, so how do you think that went? So I'm opening up the conversation right away. And then sometimes they say, oh man, I really botched that. I was so nervous, my hands were shaking. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay. Because you clearly did. Like, I wouldn't say that out loud. I would just think in my head, okay, good. They're aware that they botched it. Does botched translate? They messed it up.
Well, it translates because I come from New Zealand, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. This person might be aware that they didn't do a great job. And then you can just very calmly talk about the ideas of like how you're going to fix that in future. So maybe they need to do public speaking training. Maybe you need to rehearse a bunch more times. Maybe they don't present that part of the presentation. Like there are lots of solutions and lots of workarounds for all of these things. So just jumping in straight away and that alleviates a lot of anxiety. If people are like, oh, cool, Penny's not pissed off at me because I messed that up. And now, like, because actually, I don't know if you found this, and this is a presentation specific thing, but have you ever presented in front of a bunch of clients and you've been totally fine? Then you present in front of your peers or people that you know quite well, and you are like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. So I never want to be the person that's sitting in the crowd, like, making my colleagues nervous. I want them to be like, Penny is on my side. She's on my team. She wants me to succeed. She wants me to kill it. And we're going to kill this together.
Yeah.
Kill this together. That's nice.
I think that's the hardest thing in France is that there's such, I mean, it's one of the most wonderful things about French kind of society, I guess, or I don't want to go as broad as society, but our little industry, our little niche, is that there is a real critical eye, and there's a real sense of like, we're not just going to be spoon-fed information. We want it to be well researched. There's a critical sense of like, this person may be full of nonsense, kind of thing, or shit. And that's great, and it's also really harsh, like especially in those situations you're just talking about. Like I could go out to marketplaces like in Cannes or wherever and come back to the studio in France and just be terrified of presenting to the studio.
Yeah. I think so. My favorite framework for feedback is called the situation behavior impact model.
Wow. Okay.
It's really old, but sometimes old things are cool.
Yes.
Like us, we're cool, right?
Exactly.
So the situation behavior impact model is great because it takes feedback from being critical to being productive. So it goes like this: situation. So you're immediately giving the person a precise and specific situation that you're referring to, so that it's not just like, oh, I don't like the way you're rude to me. It's much more specific than that. Then behavior is what they did in that situation. And then impact is why you didn't like it. So for example, situation. Hey, Heath, remember in that meeting the other day or yesterday with the clients? Then 2, behavior. You kept interrupting me. 3, impact. That made me feel like you didn't respect anything I had to say, and it also didn't allow the client to hear what I had to say.
Right.
But you're just literally taking them through, like, this is the place that it happened, this is what you did, and this is how it made me feel. And you'll give someone an opportunity to be like, oh my gosh, sorry, I was just really excited. I just wanted to like emphasize your point. Or they might say something like, well, honestly, I thought you were on the wrong track. I thought you were saying things that could potentially not work for the project. So then you'll be able to have like a good dialogue. It's not about saying, I think you're always interrupting me. And then you have to like come up with examples. It's literally like at the time, figure it out and put it out there.
I love that you use the word opportunity. I feel like that's a great way to frame it, as like from both directions. If you're receiving feedback like that, then it's an opportunity to understand the other person. It's an opportunity to improve the way you're doing things. And it's also an opportunity to help, right? And then if they're explaining their reasoning behind it, it works the other way as well, where you can say, oh, okay, well, next time you do it like this.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would like to think, I'm not perfect in this regard, but if we can kind of take the ego out of things and stop being like, oh, well, I work so hard and, like, I want to succeed. We're on teams typically. We want the team to succeed. It would be nice if we could all give each other the opportunity to do our best. That'll make us all just so much happier at work if we're all on the same team. So I think it's actually like kind of a beautiful concept to make sure that you're giving everyone that chance.
Yeah, and I've had it happen to me just recently where we had a client meeting and we had a lot of technical problems. I wasn't even sure I was going to be on the call. I was like, I'm going to have to drop out like 5 minutes before the call. So everyone's quite stressed. And we came into the call and I skipped the introductions and I went straight into the process because I was so obsessed with, is it going to work technically? Yeah. And then at the end, one of my colleagues said, I said, look, I felt like it could have been better. I rushed through the thing. And she said, yeah, you skipped over the introduction. So nobody knew who was who.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, yeah, that's totally right. And the following meeting, that was so fresh in my mind. I actually was on the opposite position and I interrupted the meeting and said, excuse me, sorry, I feel like we skipped a step. Can we go back and do the introductions to why we're doing this meeting? Who's all here? What is the desired outcome? Like, what are we aiming for in this meeting? Yeah. And it's like, we're helping each other, right? It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I used to get feedback all the time that my attention to detail was very poor, and it's terrible to this day. And that just meant that because I was so hyper aware of that, I had this old colleague called Gigi, and she was really bad at like writing event copy, and I was really bad at reading contracts. But she was, so we would kind of like swap these tasks. No one's expecting you to be perfect at everything, but if you're aware of the things you're not good at, then you can compensate for them in some way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Either by like, yeah, leaning into the inconvenience of doing the work or finding someone who's better at it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Swapping
that
a
makes total
task, or getting someone to second check, take a second eye over something. What do you say? Second guess? Check? Double check. That's
Yeah, double check or pass it. Yeah, fresh eye. Exactly. So, okay, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want, but what would be the most challenging piece of feedback that someone's given you? I know what mine is, but what's yours?
Okay, definitely. And I can say this because I think it's funny. But at the time I was like quite shocked. But one of my managers quite recently in a performance review told me that he was really happy with my work and everything was great. And he's like, but we have a big problem in that you're a nice person and I know you're a nice person, but almost no one else does. Like, you should be nicer to people. And I was like, shit, yeah, I probably should. I tend to, like, at that stage, I was kind of ruling with an iron fist. So, yeah, that was hard because I thought that I was doing enough to make people think that I was nice. Well, not nice, but like, I don't want to be unapproachable. I don't really care if people think I'm nice, but I don't want people to be afraid of me on the same hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was tough. How about you?
Yeah, that does sound tough. I've got some questions about that. But it was that moment of like offering up, like, you know, I want this to be a transparent conversation, and it was like three meetings in with my development team in Paris, and I could see them kind of rolling their eyes, you know, at that kind of notion of transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the third meeting, someone had a shot at it, and they said, "Okay, well, I have some feedback for you." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "You talk too much, and we feel like we've been taken hostage in these meetings. They take too long."
Oh my God, that's amazing feedback. And that is ballsy as well.
Right? And I was like, literally like, wow, okay. And at the time I said, look, thanks so much for your feedback. I just need a little bit, and because then it was a little bit of a floodgates open about, like, you know, in this meeting and that meeting. And so I was like, I just need a little bit of time to address this, but when we come back to the next meeting, I'll have solutions to fix it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that would have been so hard. I can't imagine how hard that would have been. But also, like, sometimes the thing is, when you're receiving feedback and something's taken you aback a little bit, if you're feeling, because it's obviously much harder to get feedback than to give it. Sometimes it's good to cut the conversation off there and be like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. That's given me an enormous opportunity to improve.
Yes.
Let's just leave the conversation there because I need to process this a little bit, and then we can come back and talk about whatever you want, so that you're not just being bombarded. Because I think often when one person opens the floodgates, then it's just like, oh, and this one, and this time, and this, and you're like, oh, you just feel completely attacked.
Yeah, exactly. But I have to say that there was a before and after of that moment. There was how we worked together before that moment, and then how everything happened after that moment. There was just such a different culture in the development department. We were a small team. We were 4 people. I was managing 4 people. But honestly, people came to work happier. There was like real trust. We weren't kind of like counting hours anymore. The schedules became really honest and realistic. People were putting their personal life, like time needs in there as well. It just made everything so much easier. And it wasn't just that, obviously, but it was the moment that it shifted.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's, the other thing is, like, you can't forget to give positive feedback. People often, once they're thinking about feedback, they're like, oh, cool, there's this opportunity for me to say all these things that have been on my mind. But it's also really important to address recognition as well, and make sure that you're giving people the credit that they deserve.
Well, I don't know if it's the same in Berlin, but is there a like, I feel like there's a European kind of like a negative reaction to what I guess some would term as a shit sandwich, you know, where it's like, I'll give you something positive, I'll give you something horrible in the middle, and then I'll give you like something positive to end with.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't do that. That's been shown to reduce trust. So this used to be the way that people gave feedback. They'd say something nice and then say, but then every nice thing that you say is instantly people are already thinking about what the shit thing that's coming after is going to be. They're kind of like, oh yeah, great. So get to the point. What have I done wrong?
Yeah, right.
So it means like people aren't listening to the positive feedback and they're dwelling on the negative feedback, and it's a terrible mechanism. So get rid of the shit sandwich. It doesn't work, but you need to think about feedback should really only be one thing at a time. Just tackle one issue at a time. Don't sort of start to address like enormous performance issues and like 25 different behavioral issues. Like it should be quite focused and quite addressable. That's why you're doing it at the time. So you're never letting things build up too much and fester as well, because I think people can get a lot of stuff in their minds, and then they're like, oh, I need to like unleash this, but that's the wrong mentality. It's good to just like chip it away.
Have you ever found yourself sitting on a subject that you are kind of procrastinating in terms of confronting the subject with a colleague or a manager?
Yeah.
Are there ways to sort of crack that as well? Because I found a couple of times where, you know, I don't necessarily like confrontation. I'd say I'm much less afraid of it now than I used to be, because I feel like I have tools to deal with it. But sometimes, I'm nervous about going into things I know that are going to be confrontational.
Yeah, so definitely the most difficult feedback I ever had to give was to someone who I like is a very, very close friend of mine, and I didn't want to do it at all. Like I'm fine. It's easy to give feedback to someone who you can kind of like after work that day, you can go home that night and forget about it. But it's much harder to, when you work with someone, to kind of bring up something that's personal, or it's much more difficult. So I procrastinated on that for probably a month. Like I was really dreading it.
Yeah.
And then I found that what helped at the end was literally practicing it with friends. So I'd call up someone who didn't know that person, and I'd be like, can I pretend to give you a piece of feedback and you let me know if it offends you? And so I did that with like 3 people. And then by the time I was finished with those 3 people, they were like, there's no way I'd get offended by this. I totally understand. And I would take action in a positive way. And then I gave the feedback, and the person that received it was like really thrilled that I'd taken so much care with how I delivered it.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think it's just like writing it down, practicing it on people and getting their feedback on your feedback, and making sure that you're using the situation behavior impact model, and just do it as fast as possible though, because there's nothing worse than like sitting on something for months.
Amazing. I'm going to have to stop there, but I want to keep going. This is amazing.
No worries. We can do a part 2 some other time.
I feel like I feel like every time I talk to you, I learn so much. I mean, I remember when I came back to Berlin and went through a kind of like one of the workshop ideas I had, and both you and Brittany and Kit, I think it was at the time, gave me so much feedback. Like I just cannot thank you all enough for that. It really had made such a difference for me.
I'm so glad. Thank you. I remember that being a really fun thing. I was like, this is a different part of my day. And I think we got to a good place. So
yeah, it really helped enormously. So thanks very much. And where can people find you if they want to ask you more questions about feedback?
You can find me on LinkedIn, I guess. I'm just Penny Blackmore in the URL. Or on Instagram, which is Banter_Blackmore. Those 2 places.
And of course, they can listen to you on Happy Hour Career Talk.
I'm the worst at promoting my own podcast. So I also have a podcast called Happy Hour Career Talk with Brittany Bowring and me, and we basically talk about work life from the perspective of 2 real people. And we cover a whole range of topics, and we've heard that we are very useful Okay,
Yes,
good
yes.
feedback.
I had a production meeting like a month ago in Canada, and there were people that when I mentioned, I was actually the culture committee. I mentioned your podcast, and people were like, "Oh my God, you know Penny and Brittany?"
Get out of here,
No,
really?
fans,
Wow.
I tell you, fans.
Wow, amazing. I've always wanted a fan.
Yay!
Yay.
So yeah, it's working. You're doing something right.
Yeah, everybody listen.
Exactly. Okay, Penny, have a lovely day, and I hope you have a nice lunch.
Yes, you too. All right, thanks so much, Heath.
Bye.